Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We appreciate you joining us. My name is Isabella Perry, and I'll be your moderator. This presentation will be discussing the BRCGS Packaging Materials Issue 7, presented by Gwenda Jarrett, Non-Food Program Manager at LGC Group. For a little housekeeping, all attendees are muted for the duration of this presentation. There will be a Q&A at the end, so if you have any questions for our presenter or have any technical issues, just pop your questions in that chat in the GoToWebinar control panel and we'll be able to help you. The slides and the recording will be available after this presentation on our website. For any additional questions, please contact us through our website for more information, or at the end, if Gwenda has any information, you can contact that way. I'm going to run a quick poll for everyone, and then we will take it away. Let's see. Okay, launch. And I'll give you guys a minute to answer this. Okay, thank you guys. Okay, now Gwenda is going to take it away discussing today's topic.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to actually be with you today. Just need to show this slide just to say that any information that I actually use or you see it on this webinar is the ownership of BRCGS. You will get that on the recording when you get it. So I'm Gwenda Jarrett, the Program Manager for Non-Foods in BRCGS, part of the LGC group, as was just said. So I've got well, over 37 years of experience actually in the industry, from food manufacture, working in the packaging industry, places like Corner Metal Box. My passion is actually packaging, but I'm a foodie by training. I've worked in the certification business for a number of years. I'm an ISO 9000 auditor, BRCGS auditor in food and packaging, and an FSSC auditor. So I've got a lot of experience not only in working in industry, but also how standards are actually implemented at site. I also worked in large manufacturing organizations as global quality and food safety manager, where I was able to look globally at how these standards are actually put in place. That's enough about me. Let's carry on. So what we're looking at today is actually looking at the Packaging Materials Issue 7, an overview of the changes, what the requirements are, just a brief outline of those things that changed and what happened in the protocol. We also have the opportunity, because I think we'll have time today, unless there are a lot of questions, to actually go through some of the frequently asked questions that we've received in the 40 plus webinars that I've actually given on this subject since the launch of the standard in October of last year. And then, as we said, if you actually put into the questions bar on the left-hand side of, sorry, the right-hand side of the screen, I can try and answer some of those questions live, or maybe we can answer them later, depending on what they are. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background, this is the second largest standard that BRCGS actually have, which is for packaging materials. That's the second largest after our food safety standard. So when you think about it, all food products and consumer products have packaging. Not every product has sugar, salt, or even water, but they all have packaging. And that actually is how important the packaging industry is to both food and consumer products. So this standard is now in its 7th edition, you can see it there, and was originally launched to the industry in 2001. So it's almost our quarter of a century anniversary for this standard. So it's been around a long time. And why is that? Because it's practical, supportive, it challenges sites to improve and meets the needs and expectations of the sector, both from a manufacturing point of view, but also from a customer point of view. There's been a lot of focus on the packaging sector in recent times, from the reduction in weight of packaging so that it uses less resources and costs less to transport, particularly empty, to the movement away from plastic and the development in paper manufacturing. This is actually a very diverse part of the global supply chain. So just to give you a quick overview of the top level changes in numerical format, if you like that kind of thing, issue 6 of the standard had 316 requirements. That includes the statement of intent, that statement at the top of each clause, which is all mandatory statements. Whilst issue 7 has 315. We know because we counted them. So in the end, we reviewed, amended, combined and updated the requirements. And in the end, we actually touched 167 of the requirements of the standard. We have a key changes document, which is a document which shows in red what were the actual key changes. This is actually available and is an at a glance document. It's available from the normal places, the BRCGS store, but if you're a certificated site, you can access this from Participate. We actually believe it's very good for you to access that document. If you're preparing for your issue 7 audit, that at a glance, the red marks on the standard and the crossed out black marks will actually show you where the changes were. And as we go through the slides, I'll just show you what the key changes document actually looks like. Let's actually look at the scope of the standard. So the standard sets out the requirements for the manufacturing of packaging materials that are used in the food, feed and beverage industry for the containment of products, for hygiene sensitive products such as cosmetics and some pharmaceutical products. It also covers the manufacture of the raw materials that go to make the packaging materials, things like resin, things like paper. Also covers the manufacture of glues and inks as well, which then are used by the packaging industry. So it covers the paper and board, and then the conversion of those materials, like plastic films as well, to packaging materials. The industry is incredibly diverse, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you that, with a wide range of materials, manufacturing technologies and applications. So issue 7 of the standards address the range of products that can be included for certification. Only products manufactured at the site or undergoing manufacturing at the site can be certificated. The standard does not cover wholesale, importation, transportation or storage activities, which are outside the control of the site seeking certification. BRCGS has a range of other standards which can be used for these activities, things like BRCGS storage and distribution, as well as agents and brokers. We also have a standard for food safety, as I mentioned, but also for consumer products. There are no new additional modules associated with packaging issue 7. There used to be a module 8 was environmental monitoring. That's no longer available because we've included some of those requirements actually into the standard, but it was also never used. But we still have module 10, which is the plastic pellet loss prevention module, which can be used by both packaging manufacturers and consumer product manufacturers to actually demonstrate how the manufacturing site control the loss of plastic, which could enter into the water course and be a contaminant. We also have private additional modules, things like the TMS Harvey module as well. That's module 11. The standard has a number of applications throughout the packaging industry. Throughout the review of packaging issue 7, there was a focus on the intended use of the finished product. All the way through the standard, these are the words you will see all the time. What we've tried to do for that purpose is therefore to make the sites manufacturing the packaging think about what the intended use of the finished product is, and if necessary, do a risk assessment and use that facility to justify why you do what you do and that you don't add any more risk to the final use or the intended use of that product. That really comes into effect when you look at Section 6 and things like protective clothing, which has always been an issue. You know, I produce pallets for secondary or tertiary packaging. Why do I need to wear a hairnet? Well, the standard says you shall, but now the standard says, based on the intended use of the finished product, do a risk assessment, which is not one sentence or one paragraph. It's a full justification why what you do is what is needed to be done for your product. That needs to be available when you actually have your audit and show it to the auditor. And as I said, you know, if it's one line or one paragraph, it'll probably be pushed back because you need to do the full risk assessment. So packaging materials, packaging raw materials, packing materials, shrink wrap materials, all those products manufactured using similar technologies and raw materials are covered under the scope of this standard. We've had a lot of comments, a lot of questions asked about single-use disposable products. We've tried to be very clear in this standard, and I'm just going to give you a brief outline on what that actually means. We are writing, or I am in the process of writing a clarification document for those packaging manufacturing sites that previously in their scope have covered some form of product which is actually really a consumer product. So for products using the same or similar technologies or raw materials as those used to produce the packaging materials, for example, injection molding for plastic cutlery, these single-use disposable products may be included within the scope of the site under the single-use disposable products under Packaging Materials Issue 7, if, and this is the caveat, it's only allowed where 70% or more, at least 70% by volume of production, that the main activity of that site is making packaging materials, and those other products like single-use disposable plastic is actually just less than 30%. So you can see the majority. If what you're doing is 100% plastic cutlery for sale in the retail trade or for some use in food service, that's when the balance comes. Those products that actually go into the retail trade, that is consumer products. So if you manufacture 100% disposable single-use products, it's not food packaging, and it can be certificated under consumer product standard. The issue that we're having at the moment is to do with napkins, and we know there are some specifiers out there who want their napkins or similar products which are used in food service assessed against a GFSI, Global Food Safety Initiative, recognized standard. The information is actually in the words GFSI, Global Food Safety Initiative, does not cover consumer products. Napkins, napkin is a napkin, is not food contact, always food contact. Very often it's sold in big packets which actually go into the retail trade. Those are the main products that need to go under consumer products, as well as things like straws, which are manufactured specifically for the retail trade. So I'm going to give you now an overview of the changes. This will be quite rapid. I'm going to go through it. We do have time to cover this. If you have any questions, please raise them. But I'm going to go through what the key changes were, but I'm not going to go through everything in the standard. Let me build the slide. So to support the transition between issue 6 and issue 7, which we issued issue 7 on the 28th of October last year. Seems a long time ago now. We actually issued this key changes document, and this is where you can see that we've highlighted in red where the key changes were made actually against issue 6. You can also see on here some crossed out black areas. That's where we've removed something. So you can see at a glance, and this is why this is a really useful document for you to access. You can actually see, okay, if it's red, I need to consider if that is actually covered within my systems for my next audit. If it's black, then you need to say, okay, so what was taken away? So you need to review it. It is a very useful document, and we do recommend you have it. Obviously, you've got to have a copy of the standard. That's a requirement of knowing what's in the standard, but it's also a requirement of the audit. We also then have the interpretation guide, which is a much more heavy tome, heavy publication, and that's where we go through every clause in the standard and give you an interpretation. It's what good could look like. We are not auditing, nobody will audit you ever against the interpretation guidelines. If it's in the interpretation guidelines below the line, below the clause, then that is really, if you don't know what to do, this is guidance on how to approach and what good could look like. And again, it is really advisable that you get a copy of that. It will help you. We have some statistics which actually show that those sites actually have access to the key changes and the interpretation guideline. Their transition audit can be much more successful, less non-conformities. That's what we call success. But also if you're a new site, and you've never encountered this standard before, maybe you don't need the key changes, but the interpretation guide would be very useful. So what are the key changes between issue 6 and issue 7? And we'll go through these, most of them, more thoroughly in the rest of the slides. This is an overview. One of the key updates is in section 2 for hazard analysis and risk assessment, HARA. This section has been reviewed in line with the requirements of Codex Alimentarius, and though there are a few enhanced requirements, the main change has been the division of the requirements into a systematic process flow going right the way through the requirements. It used to be section 2, now is 2.1 to 2.11, which actually takes you systematically actually through the requirements. When you look at this, you will see a lot of red. That's because there's been a lot of change. Is there a lot which is new? Not really. I do suggest you look at it. We do have a question later on in the presentation from a frequently asked question theme on HARA. Product safety culture. From the first implementation of product safety culture by BRCGS, there has been a greater understanding in what culture is now all about. As part of this standard, further enhancement of consideration of behaviours and changes needed to improve culture has been embedded. And I will go through what are some of the guidance we've given, some of the changes in that standard, in that requirement. Management of outsourced processes. This has always been an area of some misunderstanding, so clarity, we hope, has been given on the definition and the removal of the confusion between subcontracted processes and management of outsourced processes. That now is included both in the standard and in the glossary of definitions and terms. Allergen management. With recognition of the packaging industry's place as a key part of the supply chain for food and hygiene sensitive products, consideration for allergen risks from cross-contact has been enhanced to ensure that where there is a risk identified by the HARA team, that appropriate controls like segregation and personnel training are actually put in place. So that is really making it more robust. Going on to traceability. Again, clarification has been given on the expectations of the importance of the traceability exercise. Again, I'll cover that in more detail. And then going on to then single-use disposable products, the inclusion of these in the standard has now been clearly defined. If you have any queries, you speak to your certification body. If the certification body have queries, they will come to ask us for some clarification. So within the changes that were made to the standard, there continues to be an emphasis on management commitment. Product safety management programs based on risk assessment. You'll see risk assessment all the way through. Hazard analysis and risk assessment is just one of those. Supporting product safety and quality management systems continue to be a big requirement. The continuing objective of the standard is to focus on the intended use of the finished product. I can't emphasize that enough. Risk assessment in relation to the manufacturing processes with the intended use in mind. If you're making something for direct food contact, what should be the condition within the manufacturing area to make sure that it remains fit for purpose? And all the way through, ensuring that there is a culture of continual improvement. There is also, as is the way at BRCGS, there's been a harmonisation of packaging materials issue 7 with other BRCGS standards, and you'll see that particularly in section 7 on traded products. So there were some terminology changes. As part of the review process, we had a technical working group, which was a global group representing all stakeholders, and we had a lot of discussion on even the use of individual words and what is more applicable and understandable globally. And these are the main changes. There was harmonization also between some of our other standards. So the changes were made, as you can see on this slide. Even though these changes were made throughout the standard, they do not affect the context of the requirement. The aim is to ensure inclusivity for all. So the changes include personnel is now used to refer to all members of a company, not staff, not employees, because in some countries, there's a difference between staff, which are salaried, and employees, so we've just harmonized it to call it personnel. Manufacturers used instead of production to ensure that there is no ambiguity in the understanding of the use of the word. In some industries and some countries, locations, production is not understood to be the same as manufacture. We are looking at the manufacture of packaging materials. Intermediate has been changed to work in progress to make it much more clear what's happening. Site and company are often used interchangeable to refer to the site being audited. So the site that is actually seeking certification, but there still may be some use of the word company, but you use them synonymously. Due to changes in the standard and the inclusion of single-use disposable products, the word packaging has now been replaced by product to ensure that all products manufactured are encompassed by the standard. And as I mentioned, the removal of subcontracted activities, this is now covered by outsourced processes, outsourced products, which we will actually cover later. So let's get into it. So senior management commitment is section 1, not by luck, it's by design. It's very, very important when you're looking at any of the BRCGS standards that you've got that full senior management commitment. No way can you really achieve certification, but certainly not maintain certification unless you've got that senior management commitment. And the requirement for senior management commitment and continual improvement is what's really important. So the statement has been enhanced to include that clear requirement for that continual improvement. This is actually a snip from the key changes documented. So you can see this is the statement of intent. You can see what the statement of intent used to be, and then what has been added in red And then just a small comment on the side, not always a full comment, but a comment to actually show why it was updated. So that's really important to really show you the difference, but it is important to make sure that we have that senior management commitment. Culture. BRCGS introduced the need for the consideration of product safety and quality culture for any organisation some time ago, whether you're food, storage and distribution, or packaging. Within this standard, we have kept the emphasis on the further development of the site culture in relation to product safety and quality. Product safety and quality culture at the site is looking at positive attitudes, values and beliefs towards product safety or maintaining product safety and quality, and a commitment to have a continuously improving culture, ensuring that there is senior management commitment. As part of the BRCGS audit, there will be the need for key personnel from the site to be present during the audit to discuss the site product safety and quality culture plan. That's a new requirement. Confidential reporting. In line with other BRCGS standards, there is the introduction into issue 7 of the requirement for a system for confidential reporting of any concerns relating to product safety, legality and quality. So a system that staff can use, or anybody within the business, if they see something that's not right. It's a confidential system so that there is no repercussions if somebody wants to raise something. If it's confidential, it's known to be confidential, people are more likely to use it. There is a need for a mechanism to be in place and all personnel to understand their responsibilities for bringing to the attention any concerns on issues to do with product safety, legality and quality. Records for any issues brought to the attention of the site need to be recorded and maintained. Resources. It's been recognised that a number of organisations, particularly for packaging, rely on additional external expertise to supplement knowledge which supports product safety, legality and quality requirements on site. So it's now clear that where external expertise is used, it is vital that it is still understood that the management of all requirements in relation to the standard remain the responsibility of the site. So if you use those resources, which are external, you can't devolve your responsibility. Busy slide. In the review of issue 7, there was an opportunity to review the structure of HARA, Hazard Analysis and Risk Assessment, in accordance with the requirements of Codex Alimentarius, but also to meet the needs and expectations of the packaging industry or the packaging sector. So there is now a logical flow to the process. You will actually see it in the standard, and this does align with Codex, and hopefully it is kind of self-explanatory if you work your way through it. So there's a need for a team to be set up which is knowledgeable in the processes, products, and knowledgeable in the intended use of the product. There's a requirement for the review of prerequisite programs, so GMP requirements, and how they support the site in the manufacture of safe, legal and quality products. Prerequisite programs are the supporting systems from procedures to walls, floors and ceilings, and the structure of the plant, internal and external. Supplier approval and monitoring, pest management, storage, control of contamination risks. We've added something there. Receipt of storage of goods, allergen management, as we'd already covered, looking at the importance of the packaging industry and its relationship with both the food and the non-food industry, being aware and concise or conscious of allergen risks and its importance. Product fraud and product defense. So looking at things like malicious contamination, for example, that's to be considered as part of the HARA review. As some of the prerequisite programs that form requirements within the standard support the reduction in opportunities for product fraud or product offence issues. Process flow diagrams need to be documented, and a hazard analysis, the backbone of any HARA system, needs to be documented. Determining the potential hazards that can occur, if they occur, what is the likelihood and the severity of, and then how to control these via control measures. This is the key aspect of HARA. From this, there is then a review of the monitoring requirements for the critical control measures. Yes, you heard me right. Not critical control points, critical control measures. CCPs are so synonymous with HACCP in the food industry. We've tried to make this much more relevant to the packaging industry and look at critical control measures. There's a definition in the standard, but this actually is more applicable, we feel, to the packaging industry. There's a need for validation and verification and the review of the effectiveness of the HARA system. This is looking at the plan as it's laid out, making sure that it's actually able to be implemented. It has been implemented, and there are actually opportunities to demonstrate that it is actually delivering improvements or delivering control. And this, therefore, it supports the site in the manufacture of those three words again: safe, legal, and quality products. Allergen management. Certificated sites are required to look at allergens of concern. This is a list of some of the allergens that need to be of concern. Now, yes, of course, a lot of these are food products, but it's about how a packaging site now need to look at where allergens can enter or access into the manufacturing or production area. So in the HARA, it's expected that as part of the hazard analysis, you look at if any raw materials actually have allergenic sources. So sometimes if you've got glues or lubricants, they could actually come from an allergenic source. Gluten is one of them for things like starches and some of the glues. If during the HARA, you identify that there are potential allergen risks, there then needs to be a mitigation. So what are you going to do? How are you going to control it? Do you need to do any segregation? Do you need to do any training of personnel? So only when it's identified as a risk, but the HARA will be looked at to make sure that allergen management has been considered. Going on to section 3 of the standard, this still requires a product safety and quality management system. In many instances, the standard specifically states that the requirement shall be satisfied by procedures, processes, plans, or records. In other areas of the standard, this is implied. There is still the expectation that there will be documented systems in place so there can be a consistency in approach. Documents for training, work instructions, and those documents needed to ensure that the requirements, behaviours and processes, etc. are all understood and are in place and go from shift to shift to shift, because you've got a documented list of instructions to make sure everybody works in the same way. Documents and records can be hard copy, or they can be copies of electronic documents. We then move swiftly on to 3.4 specifications, and some of the key changes here are: under the requirements for specifications, changes made to ensure that there is always sufficient detail within the specification document to allow consideration for product safety, legality and quality requirements. There's a requirement for materials that impact or provide functional effects on the safety of the final product. That's the safety probably of the food product, things like barriers, oxygen barriers, light barriers actually within the packaging material, that the specification shall include references to substantiate the proof of any claims you make, including the effectiveness of the claim. Internal audit, always a key one, is now being made clear that the expectations are for audits to occur throughout the year and not just once a year. Yes, throughout the year. People are saying, do I need to do 2? I'm a very small site. Do I need to comply with that? The answer is yes, throughout the year. Why? Because if during internal audit you identify issues, you need the opportunity to identify issues, feed it back to the management team, look at opportunities for improvement, put those corrections in place, preventative actions in place, and then go back to show that they were effective. The aim is to ensure that the benefits of audits are achieved and information can be reviewed by senior leaders. Section 3.6, supplier approval and performance monitoring. Here the main update has been to clarify the approval process and what materials included. What's included are both raw materials and finished product packing materials. 3.6.2, there is now acceptance of globally recognized quality management system certification, which have prerequisite requirements for traceability and confirmation that products supplied are safe and legal via documents such as declarations of compliance or warranties. So ISO 9000 is now accepted. There are some big organizations particularly that come to mind are resin manufacturers. They don't partake in the standard, but they do have ISO 9000. So what we're saying is, as long as you can demonstrate that their ISO 9000 actually covers traceability and legality of the product, which means you have to look at the report and not just the certificate, then as part of your risk assessment into supplier approval and monitoring, you can actually show how you accept that. Management of outsourced processes. I tried to draw a little flow diagram. Here we have had clarification in the standard around the management of outsourced process. There is a definition in the glossary that gives focus on what are outsourced processes. Any outsourced processes are to be agreed and documented in service specifications and be reviewed within the HARA plan. There's also a requirement for the monitoring and approval of outsourced processes. So hopefully you can see that this now is a more robust requirement from what we've added to it, particularly the monitoring and approval of the outsourced process suppliers. Traceability. Within issue 7, it is now clear that there is a need for the trace exercise to cover all products or product groups of products. And the expectation is that the manufacturer should be able to trace forward to the customer and back to the supplier within 4 hours. 4 hours of the request being made. You notice I said should and not shall. When the auditor asks you to do the traceability exercise, you need to ask exactly what their expectations are. We're not expecting a full vertical audit within 4 hours necessarily, where a vertical audit is not just tracing the product forward and backwards, but it could be also associated documents like cleaning records, incoming checks, finished product checks. This is actually about traceability. Change in this section includes the need to ensure that you do a trace test across the range of product groups that you manufacture. There shall be a summary of the traceability test, and all documents referenced during the test shall be part of the evidence of the test to confirm the effective execution of that test. And I said, now I said it should be done within 4 hours, or should be capable of being done within 4 hours. 3.14.6 is one of the new clauses. And this is about incident management. So 3.14.6 is the only new clause. This specifies the sites must notify their current certification body in the event of any significant product safety or legality incident within 3 working days of the issue. The kind of issue that could be reportable is a product recall. Section 4, walls, floors and ceilings or site standards. A number of clauses in this section have been added or amended with some significant changes. 4.2, building fabric, here we have divided walls, floors, ceilings, etc. into individual clauses so we can distinguish when findings are raised against each of these individual areas. Previously, it was more about the infrastructure, but now we can look at are walls the problem, or floors are the problem, or ceilings, because we do analyse the non-conformity data. 431 for utilities, here it is for the sites to consider the intended use of the product when looking at utilities and standards that need to be maintained. Again, that intended use of the finished product. Clause 4.4.1, for product defence, more guidance has been given on what needs to be considered as part of the defence plan. 4.6, for equipment, there is now a new requirement for specifications to be in place prior to procurement of any new or new to site equipment transferred from a sister site, for example. This is to ensure that the intended use of the equipment is defined and any specific requirements for product safety can be built into the specification. These requirements should be assessed by the HARA team or a suitable on-site person. Commissioning of equipment should be risk-based and line clearance in place after installation, with the aim is to reduce the potential for contamination of product. Going forward into 486, the previous standard saw the introduction of environmental monitoring programs. Now in issue 7, there is a new clause, 486. Added to ensure that there is where there's a program, then there is a review of that program at least annually to ensure that it's effective. This is a new requirement and sites really need to be familiar with this requirement to ensure that they are confident in their program. Where you've got an environmental monitoring program and you have all negatives, go back and look at your program to make sure the program is capable of actually identifying issues. The aim of this program is to really look at making sure that your system is robust. Going on to allergen management, this was not considered in issue 6 in the same way. Sites must now consider allergen as part of HARA, we've covered that, and establish, implement and maintain an allergen mitigation management plan. Mitigations for control need to be put in place, and these could be things like training or segregation and handling. .495, our gift to auditors. I don't know about the sites, I'm an auditor. There's no new requirement. What we've done into 495, we've incorporated an area where if there's drawing pins or knives or other foreign bodies, and it is the physical foreign bodies, that they can now be placed in a particular clause or set of sub-clauses where it can actually identify what those physical contaminants can actually be. Again, make sure you read the standard. Moving on then to section 5. For product and process control. Here there are a few clauses that have been added or amended to align with other BRCGS standards. The most significant are the amendments made to 5.4, manufacturing process control, to include the addition of clauses 546, which requires a procedure to be in place in the event of equipment failure to prevent any non-conforming product leaving the site. 547 requires a site to ensure the product conforms to legal and customer requirements, where product is sold by count or by weight. 548, where required by the customer, sample retention processes are in place. And 5.4.10 requires the site to consider safety, legality and quality risks associated with the products, materials or areas of the site which are actually outside the scope of the audit, the certification audit. So if you have an on-site warehouse, which you say, well, that's outside the scope because we hold something else there, the auditor may ask to see it to make sure there's nothing happening in that facility that can affect the activities being certificated. Further additional clauses, 5.5.2, which requires that the accuracy of measuring equipment relative to product parameters being controlled is controlled and maintained within permitted tolerances, calibration. And then 5.6.2 is added that equipment used for inspection and testing are validated. And this is a procedure in place for making sure that this is done. Personnel, remember, it's not staff or employees anymore, it's personnel. But this remains a fundamental clause, 6.1.1, for training and competence. The emphasis of the review of personal requirements was focused on the intended use of the finished product and the site's assessment of risks associated with the manufacturing operations. There is a change that relies on the site's risk assessment, which it needs to be made available for review. The risk assessment will justify the controls needed and will be the focal point for sites. This ensures that appropriate measures are put in place relevant to the processes and the product. Going on to traded products. This has been aligned, Section 7 has been aligned with other BRCGS standards. The main change here is in 7.1, that all operations must now be considered as part of the HARA plan. This can be a separate HARA plan or included in the site's HARA plan. The aim is to ensure that all products and the processes for which the site is responsible for are considered under HARA. This is as a minimum expected to be receipt, storage and dispatch of the product. 7.2.2, approval and performance monitoring of manufacturer packers and all of traded products. This is now aligned with the requirements of the standard, but does require a traceability test to be performed for these products. Ongoing approval of packers of materials needs to be performed at an agreed interval based on risk. Other changes to clauses in the section have been made to provide clarity and alignment with other standards. That's a very brief outline of the changes. Remember, we have that key changes document and the interpretation guide that you can actually refer to. Going on to the protocol, you may see as a certificated site, it used to be that an auditor could only attend a site for 3 consecutive visits so that the auditor didn't become too familiar with the site. We've actually increased that to 5 consecutive audits. One on the availability of auditors, but also auditors are professional. They can make sure that they continue to be professional when they go to an audit and audit thoroughly. Audit options. There has been a clarification. We have 3 options: announced, the full on-site announced audit. Packaging Materials Issue 6 was GFSI recognised. The GFSI requirement is that 1 audit in every 3 years is mandatory and announced. So if you sign up to the announced audit, 1 in every 3 will be unannounced, and that is totally unannounced. There's no phone call to say I'm on my way. We then have the blended announced audit, which is a 2-part audit, so 2 elements: the remote audit, which is to look at documentation, and then the on-site audit, which is about 28 days later when they verify what they looked at in documentation and they do the interviews and look at the production facility. Within that audit option, there is still the mandatory and unannounced audit, 1 in every 3 years. There is then an unannounced voluntary where the site can actually request that every audit is done unannounced. On-site, which would be covered documentation and facilities. Why the unannounced audit? The unannounced audit actually demonstrates not being audit ready every day, but actually making sure that an organisation can demonstrate the commitment to making safe, legal and quality products. Audit duration, so this applies to CBs, but also is important for manufacturing sites. First 6 months of any new standard, we don't change the audit duration. We've got to see how the changes have affected the audit duration. Remember, issue 6 had 316 requirements, issue 7 has 315, but they are some different ones. So there could be a difference in the requirements. We need feedback from auditors, CBs and manufacturing sites to see if there's enough time to do the audit. But what hasn't changed is there's still the expectation that whatever the audit duration is, 50% of that time should be spent in the facility, not sat in a nice air-conditioned office. If it's a very small facility or a lot of the same lines, then a minimum of 30% of the audit time must be spent on the shop floor. We then have a series of supporting documentation. You've seen the standard, the interpretation guide and the key changes. We have a site self-assessment checklist, which is available if you wanted to prepare for your audit. There's a document that you can look at. We will have a frequently asked questions document issued by the end of the year. We've got to collect those frequently asked questions, you can imagine. There is guidelines for glass manufacturers and information on additional modules. So the additional modules, as I said, are plastic pellet loss prevention, module 10, and TMS requirements, module 11. We also have as BRCGS a number of best practice guidelines. We've recently issued one on keeping protective clothing clean, pest management, for example, and effective allergen management. They're supporting documentation. So the standard has been translated into a number of languages: English, Italian, Chinese, German, Spanish, and French, but the definitive document is English. We've had some feedback this week, particularly on the German document. They say, oh, it's using different terminology. We've done the best we can. It's a good guideline, but the English document is always a definitive document. We have training. So if you're a manufacturing site, then you can have a one-day conversion course, and it will actually take you through the requirements of the standard in much more detail. Again, we do advise it because those that go through the training do tend to have an easier and more successful transition audit. There are a number of courses which are available, and you can find that on our website. They're in many places. As a certificated site, you pay a service fee. What are you paying for? You're paying for access to the directory, being able to make products available on the directory. You have access to participate. Please use it. That's where you can actually access the documents that I've just spoken about, and you can access them as PDF copies. And then there's also, if you're a certificated site, there's the opportunity to sign up to the professional. I'll just leave that slide for you. What I'd like to cover in the last few minutes that we have, a bit out of date now, I've done over 40 of these webinars. We've had way over 8,000 registrants, over 100 questions. Our interpretation guide is there, but we did also do a webinar on the 1st of April, I think it was, on some of the themes of the frequently asked questions, which I'm going to go through with you now, because I'm not seeing many questions. So let's look at them. So one of the themes we had, and I wasn't surprised, was on internal audit. And some of the questions we had is, what does audit throughout the year mean? Well, I'm going to cover that in a second. Are you expecting more than one audit in a year? Yes, we are, because they're supposed to be spread throughout the year. What is the minimum number of times we could conduct internal audits to meet the requirements? Well, that's up to your systems. My company is very small. We have less than 100 square meters. Do I still need to do more than one audit? You can see the other questions. The answer is yes. Internal audit is not a chore. It should be seen as a benefit. It should be seen as a positive opportunity to look inwardly to see if your systems are working for you. Are you a slave to your systems, or are your systems actually delivering impact and improvements? So that's what you should actually be thinking about when you do internal audit. They are really a really good system. If you had a tool belt, this would be the tool that be off your belt most of the time. So it is important that you do good internal audit. So the answer is to all these questions is yes, you need to do them throughout the year. You need to do more than one. Doesn't matter your size, you still need to do them. We do cross-site audits. Should audits be carried out throughout the year as part of the standards? Yes. I can't be more positive than that. The requirement is to schedule audits throughout the year, all activities to be audited at least annually. Themes on HARA. Due to the changes in HARA, will my HACCP team, HARA, need to be retrained as well, or just to know and understand the changes required as part of HARA? I've just taken a page out of the HARA part of the standard, and you can see there's a lot of red. But a lot of that red is really rejigging things. But my answer is not necessarily. Look at your HARA system, look at the requirements, and see if there are any gaps in your system, and if those gaps require your team to be trained. It's not a mandatory requirement, but sometimes, you know, if you haven't had training for a while, maybe it's time for refresher training. Themes on personnel. What are the rules on about wearing hair covering? What about the beard? Must it be covered? Well, whoops. That's up to you now. Section 6 says, what is the intended use of the finished product? What are your processes? And looking at your processes, what you do, how you do it, what the intended use of the product is for, and do a risk assessment. But let's be honest, if you're doing food contact packaging, and your product says a plastic container which may have static, then there is no reason why you shouldn't be wearing a hairnet. If you're making a pallet, you can probably justify why not. But it's really good to do the risk assessment, and there will be a need to do a risk assessment to see why you need to do things. It can actually support you. I believe this is my last slide. We have 2 minutes left. So we won't be able to answer any questions, but we'll come back. So some of the other themes of questions are quality certification for suppliers. You now allow ISO 9000. Yes, and hopefully I covered that. But it's not ISO 9000 where you only see the certificate. You've got to see the report and make sure that traceability is confirmed, or the ability to do traceability, and the ability to demonstrate the legality of the product. Migration, clause 2.5.1, which is within HARA. Where should migration be considered? It's considered as part of the information that goes into HARA. Audit duration, same audit duration as last year for now, unless your scope has changed or unless you have an agreement with your certification body. And single-use disposable products is my last point. Watch out for the issue on clarification. If you have any queries, please use BRCGS inquiries. It's on the back of the standard, or get in touch with Perry Johnson. So Isabel, that's me finished.
Okay, thank you everyone for attending. We hope you have a great rest of your day. And again, the slides, and the slides and the recording will be available after this presentation. So keep an eye out for that if you want to reference anything that was said today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.